So hi everyone, thanks again for tuning in to another one of our founders chats. I'm here with Sarah. Sarah is the one of the founders of Matter of Focus, established in 2017 to support public service organizations to improve, learn, and show their value. And she also interestingly comes from the university sector in a previous life as well. So Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So you are a co-founder of a startup, and you're also you also kind of come from this university sector. How have those? How did one lead to the other?
Yeah. Okay. So I worked in the university sector for quite a long time, 16 years in the end. But before that, I had worked in the third sector and the public sector. And I went to the university sector to a brand new research centre, which wanted to be quite outward facing and connect with policy and practice. So I always had this kind of one foot in the university sector, one foot out of it. And over the years that I worked in that research centre, I got more and more interested in how organisations use different sorts of information, data, evidence, feedback to understand what they're doing and to plan how they do things better, to improve, to learn, and to demonstrate how effective they are, and particularly report to funders. So I kind of went on a bit of a journey from sort of pushing research out from the university to getting much closer to organisations and their kind of complex needs of evidence and data needs. And so eventually I thought, actually it might be better to do this work outside this sector. And so with a colleague, we set up Matter of Focus. But so, I suppose what we did, yeah, go on.
What we've done in the just saying, leading on to that then is like, so how did your experience in that sector influence how you started Matter of Focus?
Yeah, well, actually, my work in the university sector was in some ways was not that dissimilar from a startup, because I worked for a research centre. It was a kind of independent unit. It sat between different departments in the university, and it sat across universities. So it was much more like working for a small organisation than you might imagine. We were also self-funded, so we had to apply for grants and generate income in order to survive. So we did all the hiring and firing of people. And although we had the support of the university and some of the university systems sitting behind that, actually, sometimes that was helpful and sometimes that was less helpful. So actually, in terms of and also I pioneered a kind of area of work, which in the university sector is called knowledge exchange, which is about how people use different kinds of evidence and knowledge. And so I've been quite entrepreneurial, I suppose. So for me, it's never felt like a massively different step. I mean, there are some things that are fundamentally different about it, but there's quite a lot of similarities as well.
Cool. So just describe to us, what is Matter of Focus, if you had to if you had to focus it down or nail it down.
Yeah, so basically we work with organisations on outcome evaluation, and in Scotland and all around the world, increasingly public services, whether they're provided by the actual public sector or by charities or voluntary sector, third sector, they're commissioned on the basis of outcomes. So rather than being commissioned to deliver a service, they're commissioned to improve people's lives in some way. And so a lot of people then struggle to show how delivering this service or program or whatever it was improves people's lives. And Ailsa, my business partner, and I have a method of doing that, which we found was really, really popular. So we have a method of helping people work through what it is about the way that they do things that really makes a difference for people. And what we've done since we set up in 2017 is build a software platform that then helps people actually do the quite complex job of getting all their data and evidence and feedback streamlined in a way that can really help them understand how change happens, improve, and also be able to tell a really good story of how they make a difference.
So what's an example of like a project, a project going through your kind of funnel?
Okay, so I'll give a very simple example, which I quite often use, which is I did a bit of work with a forest school. So the forest school movement is an international movement. It's about getting kids outside more, right? So basically, they were running a short-term program over the summer holidays. They were recruiting from some of the poorest kids in their area, and they were giving them this opportunity to be outside and do things outside. And their funders wanted to know, well, how is this going to make communities more connected? How is it going to to make children more healthy and active. So we sat down with them, and the first thing we always do with organizations is create what we call an outcome map. So we sit and actually say, okay, if you run these sessions, how are you going to get the right people? How are they going to respond to your program? What kind of learning are they going to get out of it? How might they behave differently? And what difference is that going to make to them? And then how are you going to know that? And how are you going to show it? So we do a bit of mapping the outcomes, then we do a bit of how are you going to collect feedback and data and evidence to show this story unfolds as you imagine. And then what our software basically is a way of holding that, we call it a theory of change or outcome map, and then drilling into it and pulling data up to show, oh yeah, well, kids really like coming, and we can prove that because they said these really positive things, they kept coming back, so you have some measures for each part of the story.
Cool.
Yeah, and the software streamlines that, so you can then just pull off a report for your funder that tells that story.
And what are your biggest challenges as a business right now?
Yeah, as a business, well, we have a few different things. One is we're serving the public and third sector, and so timelines are very long. So, even though people want to work with us, they have to get it into their next budget round, and they have to, work that through. So our sector has some particular challenges, which would be the same for anyone else working with that sector. And then we have a few organizations face a couple of challenges working with us in this way because it's quite different from the way they work. So a lot of organizations have a sort of proliferation of feedback, data, surveys, event feedback, all of these things that's not very streamlined. And so actually going through that process of going, well, why are we collecting this stuff and what are we doing with it can be quite a big change process depending on what the organization's like. That can be a little bit challenging. But then, apart from that, actually, the sort of startup journey we've found, on the whole, fairly enjoyable and straightforward. It has its pressure points, and I think one of the most difficult things as a startup is how you manage growth and how you decide when's the right time to get more staff in, and how you just manage that whole growth process. I think is quite tricky, but I'm enjoying the challenge.
So working with organizations and nonprofits and entities that require long timelines, kind of contributes to this whole idea that that organizations like that or the public sector are these kind of big behemoth bureaucracies that scare people off, and the reason why you came out and started your own startup is because you wanted to get out of the bureaucracy, and I think you have a different take on that, right? So how is the public sector innovative?
Yeah. Well, I think what you have in the public sector is you have those layers of bureaucracy that are kind of inevitable with big organizations, and then you have not a lot of money and a lot of people really doing an amazing job with not a lot of money. So it's been fascinating for us, for example, reading all of the agile agenda and all the stuff around agile working, because in the public sector, you have no choice but be agile. That is the way it is. There is no extra money. So you can't really, it's much, much harder to waste money, and you have to really justify how you spend money and how you work. So you get a lot of people really trying to do innovative things and really trying their best in environments where cash is short. And also, I think a lot of the public sector in Scotland particularly really embraces the fact the world's a complex place, and actually some of the old ways of working that we used to use that were very kind of top down and hierarchical aren't fit for purpose. So Scotland is really pioneering around, well, actually the best services are delivered in partnership with people in which they participate, that are really tailored to different places. So all of that kind of thinking that is much more prevalent in the particularly in the startup world is actually pretty embedded in some of those organizations in a way that you might not expect. And there's some, a lot of people inventing and trying different things, and if they don't work out, moving on and trying something else in a really brilliant and responsive way.
That's really cool. So why did you then decide, so you saw this problem, you saw an opportunity to fix it, and then yet you still decided to start a company rather than a charity or talk to me about the reasons why you were deliberate in forming this group, this organization to tackle this problem the way that you did.
Yeah, well, we went through all of the different models that you could have as a organization. So a charity, you know, a social enterprise, a community interest company. There's a lot of different models. They're quite variable in different parts of
Yeah.
the world, but in
Yeah.
Scotland we
Yeah.
went through the ones. And in the end, we decided that they were all restrictive in some way or other. Whereas if we were a company, we'd have a lot more scope to do things the way we wanted to. And actually, we've been really lucky because just as we set up, the whole zebra movement was
Yeah.
also really getting going. So, you know, companies that are interested in purpose, not just profit. And we always had, you know, our real interest is in helping public services be better and do the best job they
Mm-hmm.
can.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we need to have a profitable and sustainable company in order to do that, but it's definitely a dual mission.
Sure.
And so, what we can do, because we're a private company, is we can decide to give discount in whatever way we want to different sorts of organizations. So, we really
Yeah.
work hard to make our approach accessible to very small organizations, and in the charity sector to, you know, make it work in a way that's cost effective for them and efficient for them. So, yeah, in the end, it just gave us the most flexibility. And I suppose we've just also been linking up with the whole B Corporation
Mm-hmm.
kind of movement, which is an
Mm-hmm.
international movement about doing business better. And it feels like a really good time to be in the business sector, but also to be thinking about how you do good in the world.
So jumping onto that, why are
Yeah,
you? Why is it important to do good in the world from a commercial perspective? Like, so why are you
yeah,
a values-led business, aside from you wanting to do good, and that's
yeah,
the point?
yeah.
Just why does it actually make sense commercially?
Yeah, well, I think it makes sense in a number of ways. I mean, first of all, you know, we've got these massive environmental challenges that are happening, and if business doesn't get smarter about its sort of social and environmental impacts, it's actually doing harm. And I think quite a lot of that's been really unrecognized in the past, but it's beginning to get much more dialogue around the harms that businesses do. So obviously for us, morally and ethically, we just wouldn't have been in that place where both people who've worked in the public sector have always felt that, you know, we're trying to use the opportunities that we've given to do better in the world. So for us, it's almost like a complete no-brainer. But there are some other advantages, and one of the ones we've really found actually is in terms of getting people on board.
Yeah.
People really like working for a company that has a mission that actually cares about people and what's happening in the world. And you can recruit great people and you can have a great company culture because everyone's bought into the mission, so they really believe in what we're trying to do. And I think that's a massive advantage. And I think there's been research that shows, particularly if you're trying to recruit for jobs that are maybe, you know, where skills are a bit shorter, actually it can be a real advantage to be. And every time we've run interview rounds, and we said to people, why do you want this job, that has every single time come up. Oh, I thought what you were doing was really cool and really interesting, and I want to work in an environment where I feel like my, you know, getting out of bed in the morning serves a bigger purpose than just paying my bills. So I think there are some advantages in terms of staffing as well. And then, yeah, so there's a couple of the key things.
So how big is your team?
At the moment, we're 6 people.
6. Okay, cool. And so and you mentioned it there, but like, talk to me a little bit about the way that culture impacts the way that you work,
Yeah.
and your specific.
So yeah, so we have an explicit value statement, but for us, it was really important to make that value statement real because, you know, there's a lot of companies who have a value statement, but it's a kind of PR statement, really. It's not actually about
Yeah.
how work unfolds in a day-to-day way. So we have a value statement, but we also have some staff expectations that sit underneath each of those values. So we're very explicit with staff about what it means for each one of those values. And when we interview people, we ask them about the values. And when they come on board, we talk to them about what it means in terms of their day-to-day work. So some of the stuff for us is about how we treat our clients so that we're respectful to our clients. You know, a lot of our clients are working under very difficult circumstances. We have to be really careful about what they're trying to achieve and the restrictions and and some of the difficulties they face. And it's really important for us to we have some statements around how you use your own personal power in those situations. So it's about reflecting on who you are as a person and working with people in a really getting alongside people. And and we try and embed in our culture ways of making sure we're all reflecting on how we're doing and where we're going, and we actually use our own approach on our own work so that we can see how we make a difference. And that's a bit of a work in progress at the moment, but we are doing that particularly with our client-facing work and increasingly with some of our other strands of work. So it's definitely. I mean, I'm really interested in company cultures and how they build up and what it is that makes them, because some of it's a little bit intangible, isn't it? And I think
Yeah.
the other part of it that's really important is actually getting rid of people who don't fit company culture. And I think that's quite often where it goes wrong, that people have an idea of culture and they get and you try and recruit based on that, but you can't always get it right, and you can't always get the exact right fit. And when you're recruiting staff, you don't really know until they get their feet under the table, do you? But we have, we've taken a couple of difficult decisions when that hasn't worked out, and really grasped the nettle. And I think that is fundamentally important for two reasons. One is you make sure you keep all the people on board who have a great fit and who are working together really well. And the second one is you give a message to those people that you really care about that. So if someone isn't a good fit, everyone knows they're not a good fit. And if you let that slide, you're kind of undermining the whole thing about company culture. But I'd say the other thing that really is really important to me personally and to how we do business is I think a lot of work is terrible. A lot of the work out there. So I've got kids who are young adults, and so if you look at what them and their friends are dealing with as they graduate and what opportunities there aren't, and how even some big companies who have a lot of talk about how they treat people well, actually there's a whole tranche of people they treat really badly, that they recruit on short-term contracts with minimum hours. There's a lot of terrible workplace practice out there, and I just feel we should try and create a dialogue around something different. And it's not so important to squeeze every ounce of profit out that you should be allowed to treat people that badly, but somehow that is what's going on at the moment, certainly in the UK, and I'm sure around the world as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of points that you kind of brought up there, but I find it the most interesting that, you talked a little bit about your value statement, but you're right, like, you can't impose culture on people. You also can't create a culture, right? A culture always is built up of the people that you're choosing to associate yourself with.
Yeah.
It's not some, you know what, today we're going to be, we're going to make the company culture. Hey, everyone, let's gather around. Right. Yeah. But, so like, it's a tough thing, but as you say, hiring and choosing not to go forward with someone on culture versus, ability, it definitely, it splits the room, right? I mean, and there's a lot of talk about, right? Do you hire and fire fast? Do you hire slow? And what does that actually do with retention? What's the difference between the skills that you need right now versus the culture that you're trying to build and contribute to? And so you're a team of 6. How has that changed? And you only started in 2017, but are you expecting that to stay the same, or are you expecting to grow quite a bit?
Well, we are doing some consolidation. So our year end is like June. So we're just coming to the end of our second year of trading. I've only been there full time since November 2017. So obviously we haven't all been, we're a startup, right?
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
So what we've decided to do is spend some time consolidating before we go for a growth phase. So actually what we're looking at over the next maybe 6 months or so is probably not hiring more people and just doing some, like we've been through various, some of the Scottish enterprise, business support, advice. We've got a lot of things that we just need to get lined up before we go for a growth phase. So that's where we are at the moment. So I don't know what I would say about the culture stuff if I was hiring teams of 20 people or something. I might say something different. But I also worked in a research centre for years, as I said, and it had a real reputation for being the nicest place that anyone had ever worked. And that was about creating an environment which is respectful and treats people well. And it was a centre for research on families and relationships. So it was staffed mainly by women. A lot of them had kids. I mean, all that stuff about work-life balance, about actually doing, working in a way that gives people the job that they want, that then they're completely passionate about and really care about and are prepared to go the extra mile for when required. That is definitely my sort of philosophy to workplace, and it was effective there. And so I think Ailsa and I are pretty solid on, we're not compromising that, because also we have experienced in other sectors some of the very worst of workplace, where people are performance managed within an inch of their lives, where they never have autonomy, where everyone is miserable, people are off sick, we know what bad culture looks like, which I think is helpful, actually, because if you're trying to create a good culture but you've got no idea what bad culture looks like, you don't see the warning signs. So the other day, for example, we were thinking about how we track our time with different clients, and we were thinking about, all right, what should we do? And you have to be really careful with that, because we need some intelligence into how we all spend our time. But we don't want people to think they're accountable for every hour of their time. That would be awful, So there are some real business conundrums in that whole cultural piece about how you treat people and how you try and get the best out of people and how you try and create a workplace that is everyone's happy to come to work. And actually, when we came back in January, our first team meeting, we said, okay, so how are we doing? How do people feel about coming in to work? Like it's Black Monday, right?
Exactly.
And everyone said, yeah, I'm really happy to come into work today. So, that's at the bottom line. If you have that, then you have a lot of goodwill that's going to put your business in a really strong position.
And just thinking about other organizations or maybe public sector groups or others that you've experienced or just watch and see, is there anyone out there doing things that you just find really interesting, that you're excited to kind of watch the progress, watch their progress, or maybe institute some ideas into matter of focus going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I've really got probably the business networking that I've got the most out of since I left the university is definitely through the Zebra movement. So there's there's not a lot. There's a small number of companies, including yours, Rob, who have started meeting together and having some of these conversations.
Yeah.
And because I suppose what's tricky about being in this space, it's a public sector solution that people in the business world don't really understand, because on the whole, they don't really understand the public sector. That is run by two middle-aged women. We're not typical startups people that has a mission. So there's lots of ways in which we don't fit into the normal business square hole, and so that can be quite wearing and quite difficult. So for example, recently we did a pitch for a competition and we didn't quite fit into the social enterprise peg or the business peg, because we're somewhere in between, and so they just they didn't have the right tools to judge us. And so it can be quite frustrating. But there's this wonderful Zebra movement where you can actually meet a whole load of other people who think, let's do business differently, and so I've really, really enjoyed, and I think, the people in America who are leading that, we Skyped one of them into one of our meetings, one of the Zebra meetings, and she was, and I'm sorry, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. I think she was really, really inspiring, and they're so ambitious as well. They're not just going, we need a bit more space for this sort of business. They're going, no, we want to try and change how business is done and change the world. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. And that's how you kind of create momentum as well. So, yeah. Cool.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk and to share your story. I mean, any kind of any final kind of thoughts about where you want to take Matter of Focus in the next kind of year, 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah. So we think we've got a really, really good solution that does really help people improve how they deliver services and how they show that they've delivered great services. And so we want that to go as wide as possible. So we've definitely got ambitions to spread it, not just in Scotland, but we're already doing a little bit of work outside Scotland and definitely more around the world. So cool. We want to create a company that's vibrant and where the solutions are available to lots of people. So hopefully we will.
You will. All right. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Okay, thanks.
All righty. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.